All right, hang on. I got this. Oh, hold on. Ugh. Okay. We're going to get this. We're going to get this. All right. Well, maybe a little short. So, a ladder to heaven. Seems like a good idea, but not particularly achievable. Our Torah portion this week is Vayeitzei. And Vayeitzei continues the story of our ancestor Jacob, soon to be renamed Israel. And it illustrates something really, really significant about our ancestors. So let's begin with the unstated. You know, our story apparently begins with Abraham and Sarah and continues with Isaac and Rebekah. And yet, it is not until Abraham's grandson, Jacob, that we see the beginning of the promise that God made, that we would become as numerous as the stars and as the sands on the shores of the sea. Jacob has no less than 12 sons and one daughter, and more importantly, he passes on his name to us. We are the children of Israel, not the children of Abraham. We are the house of Jacob, not the house of Isaac. Now that's striking. How is it that Jacob merits the particular status of really, apparently, is the founder of our peoplehood, unlike his father and grandfather? It's a striking thing. So, what is it special about Jacob? There's a lot of things that we might look at about Jacob and say, I'm not so sure I want him to be my eponymous ancestor. So, you know, aside from the fact that he's the younger of the two sons of the twins, Esau and Jacob, we see that he has a manipulative trickster quality to him. First of all, he does basically put his older brother in a forced choice situation where the brother gives up his inheritance, all of his inheritance, for the sake of a bowl of lentils, which is outrageous on one level, but sort of excusable, because if Esau is really ready to give up everything for an immediate impulsive purchase, is he really the person we want leading our people into the future? So that's excusable. On the other hand, Jacob also acquiesces to his mother's devious, deceptive plan to shift the blessing that Isaac is planning to give to Esau onto Jacob. And this takes a lot of effort. And while Jacob isn't the source of this particular trickery, he's not guiltless. He is complicit. He's an accomplice to all of that. And then later, we will see Jacob pull yet another stunt, and that is that after making an agreement with his uncle about how they're going to divvy up the flocks of goats that he oversees based on the patterns of their skins, we learned that Jacob has a little trick up his sleeve in the field of animal husbandry that will allow him to bias the offspring of all of his goats towards the pattern that he gets to claim. And as a result, he gets a disproportionate number of the goats that he oversees. They become part of his flock and not his uncle's flock. So, sharp practices, not something particularly admirable. On the other hand, there are certain things about our ancestor Jacob that are really striking. And one of the most important is that Jacob he's really the first of our ancestors in the book of Genesis who has a vivid inner life. So, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the fact that we have at least two occasions where he experiences a dream. He may actually have a moment of hallucination. But we tend to take it a little more seriously as a kind of visionary experience. He has a plan for what he wants to achieve in the future, and we see him implement what we would call advanced critical skills. And I think this is kind of important for what the Jewish people will become. We will become the people who are dreamers, the people who can imagine something better, something beyond. And at the heart of all of this is a very strange incident in our Torah portion. That is that Jacob goes out, he's fleeing from his brother, who not terribly surprisingly wants to kill him for having cheated him out of his inheritance, but then also out of his blessing. And so Jacob is heading east. He's heading back into the territory of what is today Syria, where he's going to connect with distant relatives eventually, hopefully. But right now, he's alone and forlorn. And he is so bereft of any resources that he just puts his head on a rock and falls asleep. Now, this experience leads him to have a dream. And it is a remarkable dream. It's one of the most vivid and cinematic moments in the Torah. This dream consists of Jacob seeing a sulam. A sulam could be a ladder, or it could be a ramp, or a staircase. We're not sure because this is one of those words that appears in the Hebrew Bible and doesn't appear anywhere else. So we don't know for certain what that term meant to our ancestors. But in any case, it is some kind of elevating device that reaches all the way up to heaven. And then Jacob has a further part of the vision in which he sees angels, malachim, messengers, ascending and descending on the ladder or the ramp or the staircase. And then he sees at the top of the sulam God. What the visual representation of God is, we have no idea. It's part of the general vagueness that people will see God occasionally, but it isn't necessarily anthropomorphic. God appears in various forms. In any case, God is there at the top of the staircase, or the ramp, or the ladder, and God announces that he is going to accompany Jacob out of the land of Israel, out of the land promised to his grandfather Abraham, that he's going to be with him and protect him. Now, interestingly enough, Jacob gets to interact with God in this dream and has some hesitation about what's being promised. Can I really trust you? Are you really going to do this for me? And they come to a sense of agreement. So now Jacob has a sense of purpose, that he has a sense that providence is with him. And then he proceeds with much greater confidence into the future, into first Syria and then 20 years later, he'll return to the land as a magnate, as a sheik, as a powerful person, and seeking to fulfill his destiny and his relationship with the land that God mentions during this time. Now, the thing I want to call attention to is that the ladder, or staircase, or ramp, sulam, that is referred to here goes all the way up to heaven. What is not so often remarked upon in the commentaries is that we've had something like this before in the book of Genesis. And if you will recall, some of you may already be thinking of it, is the incident in chapter 11 of Genesis where the people, there are no Israelites, Hebrews, or Jews yet, take upon the ambitious project of building a building that will reach to the heavens. It goes badly. So I think we're meant to recall that incident when we think of this dream. Now, realize that there's something similar going on here, but there's also something different, and that is that the physical effort to reach heaven via construction is a total failure. On the other hand, the imaginative exercise of reaching heaven, the idea, the dream of reaching heaven, as it were, the vision of reaching heaven, that is not a lost cause. That is a possibility. In fact, Jacob's attempt to reach heaven ends up in a conversation with God. And I think that's deliberate. I think that's intended. And what it is that we can take from that is the idea that maybe, just maybe, that what we're meant to be are builders, and there's plenty of evidence later in the Hebrew Bible that Israelites are expected to be builders of the world, but we also have to do so with our imagination and with our inner life. Not necessarily we have to concretize everything in our faith or our inner experiences. So it's all right to be a dreamer. As a matter of fact, it's good to have ambitions, but some of those ambitions may be realized externally. Others of them remain inside of us. I think a fun little bit of gematria. For those of you who are not familiar with gematria, gematria is this homiletic interpretive tradition that says, well, look at every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. So if you add up all the values of all the letters in a word, you may be able to find equivalencies in other words that draw intellectual or spiritual or moral connections. Aha! So our word sulam, that appears nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible, that we have no idea what it technically actually means. If you add up the gematria of sulam, it ends up being the same numeric value as the word Sinai, as in Mount Sinai. So, is that a coincidence? Is that intentional? Is that trying to say to us that the real way, the real royal path to heaven, the way to find God is not a physical structure, not even a mountain in the literal sense of the word, something that touches heaven, but Torah. Through our moral and spiritual strivings, our metaphoric climb, we are able to actually touch the heavens. We are able to see the face of God. It's not something that we can do physically in the external world, but like our ancestor Jacob, It's something very, very reachable in our inner life and our inner experiences. So, Sulam, Sinai, a ladder to heaven, a staircase to God, that may be part of the lesson we're supposed to take. And because Jacob has this rich inner life and can point the way into how to have a relationship with God despite our flaws, despite the fact that in some ways we're all Jacob, we're all working on getting ahead and achieving things, that doesn't prevent us from developing the rich inner life necessary to live as truly faithful Jews, human beings, wherever we find ourselves, whatever our circumstances, good or bad, that there's always a stairway to heaven if we imagine that stairway is inside of us. Well, that's my taste of Torah for this week, and I look forward to talking to you next week.